Have you ever noticed that you can have unlimited entertainment in your pocket and still feel bored? You carry dozens of apps, endless videos, millions of songs, and more information than any generation in history. Yet somehow your brain still says there's nothing to do. That raises a strange question. What happened hundreds of thousands of years ago when there were no screens, no books, no games, and no internet? What did the first humans do when boredom struck? And we're not talking about ancient Greece or Egypt. We're going much further back, 100,000 years. 200,000 years, a world before writing, before cities, before civilization as we understand it, a world where small groups of humans sat around fires in caves with long stretches of empty time. The answer may completely change how you think about creativity, religion, and even your own mind. But first, we need to answer something important.
Did early humans even experience boredom? For decades, many scientists assumed the answer was no. The common belief was simple. Life was so difficult that ancient humans spent every waking moment trying to survive, hunting, gathering food, repairing shelters, escaping predators. According to this view, there simply wasn't enough free time to become bored. Then, researchers started looking more closely. In 1966, anthropologist Marshall Salins published work that challenged this entire assumption. After studying the Juhuansi people of the Kalahari Desert, one of the closest living examples of traditional hunter-gatherer life, he discovered something surprising. They weren't constantly working. On average, they spent only around 15 to 20 hours each week obtaining food and meeting basic needs. That's per week, not per day.
The rest of their time was spent resting, socializing, relaxing, or simply doing very little at all. Salins famously described hunter-gatherers as the original affluent society, not because they possessed enormous wealth, but because they possessed something modern people rarely have: time. So the real mystery isn't whether ancient humans became bored, it's what boredom pushed them to create. The first answer is play. That sounds trivial, but it may be one of the most important developments in human history. In 2010, archaeologist Francesco De Rico and his colleagues examined shells recovered from Blombos Cave in South Africa. These shells were approximately 75,000 years old.
Each shell had been deliberately perforated and covered with red ochre. They weren't tools, they weren't weapons, they weren't food. They were ornaments. Someone tens of thousands of years ago sat down and carefully transformed ordinary shells into jewelry. These objects represent some of the earliest known examples of symbolic art ever discovered. What's remarkable is how much effort this required. Creating even a single bead using stone tools would have taken hours, perhaps longer. No metal, no machines, no electric drills, just patience.
Ancient people willingly invested enormous amounts of time into making something that served no immediate survival purpose. Why? Because humans don't simply endure boredom. We respond to it by creating. Art may not have emerged from necessity alone. It may have emerged because people had spare time and minds searching for stimulation. The same story appears in music. In 2008, archaeologists excavating a cave in southern Germany uncovered an astonishing object, a flute carved from the winghorn of a vulture. It was around 40,000 years old.
Long before farming, before kingdoms, before written language, someone decided to turn a bird bone into a musical instrument. Nobody needed music to survive, yet they made it anyway. Researchers such as neuroscientist Daniel Levitin argue that musical abilities may be incredibly ancient, possibly older than complex language itself. Rhythm and pattern recognition are deeply embedded in the human brain, and recognizing patterns was essential for survival. Music may have begun as the brain playing with abilities it had already evolved. But boredom didn't only give rise to art and music, it may have unlocked imagination itself. Think about what boredom actually is.
To become bored, you must recognize that time is passing. You must imagine that something different could be happening. You must compare the present with possibilities that don't yet exist. In other words, boredom requires imagination. A creature incapable of imagining alternatives cannot truly be bored. Humans can. Imagine an early human sitting beside a fire at night. The hunt is over, food has been eaten, darkness surrounds the camp. Eventually, the mind begins wandering. What if tomorrow's hunt fails? What made those tracks near the river? What lies beyond the distant mountains? Why do people die? Where do they go afterward?
Questions like these shaped everything that followed. Religion, philosophy, science, all began when humans started wondering about things they couldn't immediately see or explain. Modern research supports this connection. In 2013, psychologist Sandy Mann conducted experiments designed to intentionally bore participants. Some volunteers spent time copying numbers from a phone book before completing creative tasks. The results were striking. Participants who experienced boredom consistently generated more original ideas. Why?
Because when external stimulation disappears, the brain starts generating its own. And the human brain is extraordinarily good at doing exactly that. There's one final activity ancient humans almost certainly relied upon when boredom appeared: conversation. More specifically, storytelling. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, famous for proposing that humans naturally maintain social groups of roughly 150 people, investigated what humans actually discuss during everyday conversation. His conclusion was surprising. Around 65% of human conversation revolves around social information: who did what, who said what, and what happened to people we know. In other words, gossip.
Today, gossip often sounds trivial. Evolutionarily, it was revolutionary. Before language, primates strengthened relationships through physical grooming. The problem is that grooming is slow and limited. You can groom only one individual at a time. Language changed everything. Now, entire groups could bond simultaneously around a fire. Stories could be shared, reputations could spread, trust could form between people who had never directly interacted. Dunbar argues that language may have evolved primarily as a social tool rather than simply a practical one.
Human civilization may owe its existence, at least in part, to people sitting together with spare time and talking. So where does all of this leave us? 75,000 years ago, someone transformed shells into beads. 40,000 years ago, someone turned a vulture-bone into a flute. And for countless evenings in between, people gathered around fires, asking questions about life, death, nature, and the universe. Some of those questions evolved into religions, others evolved into science, others became stories, myths, and art. And many of those same questions still occupy your mind today. Modern psychology has a term for what happens when the brain receives constant stimulation: cognitive overload. When every silent moment is immediately filled with entertainment, the brain loses opportunities to reflect, process experiences, and create new ideas. Neuroscientists have identified something called the default mode network, a collection of brain regions that becomes active when you're not focused on a task. This network plays major roles in creativity, empathy, memory, and self-reflection. Ironically, it activates most strongly when you're doing nothing. For roughly 300,000 years, humans used quiet moments to imagine, create, and explore ideas. Today, silence is increasingly rare, yet every time you put your phone away and allow your thoughts to wander, you're participating in an ancient human tradition. You're doing exactly what countless people did around prehistoric fires. The same wandering mind that produced beads, music, stories, religion, and science still exists inside you. Ancient humans weren't held back by boredom. Boredom may have been the force that made us human in the first place.